We have a disgraced cop who was involved in multiple escapades. This is the Laverne PD. Now, this is a female officer and multiple male officers, and there were a lot of sexual escapades on duty that were happening. And this female officer, amongst all these other officers, they were told to get out of that department. And there's a huge issue within that department because you pretty much had most of the department. I'm saying that hyperbolistically, but you had a decent amount of the department involved in these escapades where you would have this female officer and multiple male officers on duty, having their little secret rendezvous, multiple officers at a time. And now it comes out that this female officer, is actually suing the police department and not taking any accountability, saying she was coerced and saying she was forced to involve herself in these activities. Now, just to paint a background on this, she's a police officer, so someone who's supposed to be patrolling our community and protecting our individual rights is now coming out and saying that she's not responsible, she's not accountable, she was coerced. This happened on multiple occasions. It wasn't just one occasion, it was many occasions that happened. So for this police officer to not take any accountability, that says something huge of the type of people who we have who are supposed to be protecting and serving, right? This is now a concern because it's one thing to do it in private. It's another thing to do it while you're on duty and to now not even necessarily backtrack, but not even take accountability for your actions. That's a huge problem. It means that there's not enough good vetting that is being done within these local communities. Second, we have her saying that she's mentally unstable. So again, we have a cop who is not vetted mentally, someone who is coming into the community and she's dealing with her own mental, personal issues, and that's fine. She needs to get them sorted out. But now to take someone who is supposed to be responsible for other people, and you're supposed to protect other people's individual rights. You took an oath to the Constitution. We have to have the right people in place to be part of that system. We can't just let anyone come into that system. They're mentally unstable, they're going around, they're enticing men, there's other men who are, jumping on that opportunity. This also says a lot about the men around this woman. It's not just the woman's fault. These men were also part of this issue. The other male police officers who were on duty doing these escapades, they're also at fault. You have to have men who have discipline, who have willpower, who are there for the mission. You can do certain things in your private life and on your off time, but you're now mixing business with pleasure. You should know you need to separate this and take this job very seriously. You're out here trying to chase criminals and protect people from robbery, theft, from anything of that nature, and you're putting people at risk by enjoying 5 seconds of fun. We also have cultural degradation here because this woman says that she was in an open marriage and her husband is actually supportive of her escapades with multiple men at the same time on many occasions. So what this tells us is we are in such dire situation where I've said this before, but sexual dynamics, how men and women operate with each other, how they interact with each other, that is the core of how our civilization functions. When we have nuclear families, when we have men who are leaders and women who are building the household and they're staying together and they're committed and their duty is to raise children who can be part of the next generation to advance society, we are promoting civilization. When we have a type of anarchy or men and women are just doing as they please left and right, that slowly degrades that civilization. And another civilization who does have a strong nuclear family or a strong family structure in general, they will come in and they will take over. Now, I'm not saying family structures are perfect. They're far from perfect. They're dysfunctional. But generally speaking, if you have a guy who is allowing his girl to go out and do whatever she wants with other men, first of all, it tells us that this guy, this woman does not respect or admire this guy. Then this guy he's so limited on options that he's willing to forgo paternity risk, because women know who the child, whose child it is. They know they don't know who the father is, but they know that it's their child, right? They're pregnant with a child. Men don't know, so men have something called paternity risk. They're trying to secure their position to ensure that the baby is theirs. Now we have paternity testing, but for the longest time we had evolved with no paternity tests, and even now it can be extremely difficult to get a paternity test, even after the fact, so it's not always a guarantee. So you have men who are becoming weak and they're not secure where they are in their relationships and their positions. And you have women who feel so liberated that they can do whatever they want. And you can do whatever you want, but we need to understand what the societal consequences of this are. Now, when you talk to men or women individualistically, most people are not going to think, well, by my actions, I'm affecting society because I'm just one person. But you take that and you multiply it over thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people. Now you're affecting society. You're affecting infrastructure. You're affecting, like, all of the advancements we have in society. They're all a positive consequence of people having stability in their family, some stability, and then building up or structuring up. If you have no stability, again, women are being super promiscuous, and you have, like, there's a hierarchy to this. So if I want to portray the hierarchy, and this is just how reality works, you'll have the top percent of men who they can maintain a stable family structure, but they can have multiple female partners. Now, that's only for the top 1 to 5% of men. That's not most men. These are kings, emperors, sultans. Then you have the rest of men who have limited options because they're not in that top percent of category, because women want the top percent of men. And the rest of the men will have to consolidate on something like a marriage to secure that contract of, okay, I will provision, protect, and in exchange, I will get children. And then naturally, if this structure of the male side is flipped, where now these men are weak and they're feminized, and the women's side are masculinized and they're structured much differently, you end up in a result like this, where also you have mental instability, which is perpetrated by, big pharma, big med, where they come in and they offer all these, let's say, substances. And I believe we and maybe one other country are allowed to advertise substances on television. And most other countries, you're not able to advertise because there are such dire consequences, negative consequences to the substances, and they take it very seriously. Whereas here in America, it's a big moneymaker. So there's a lot of interests that align there, including with your physicians, with your doctors, with surgeons, and it can be a whole kind of racket in a sense. So here in America, especially in our medical industry, we're taught to treat the symptom, but not find the root cause and solve the actual root cause. So if you have people who are, let's say, low in testosterone, the doctor may say, okay, we'll put you on testosterone replacement therapy. That actually may not be the best form of therapy. The best form of therapy would be, okay, where's your sleep at? Where's your hydration? What minerals are you getting? Are you getting enough sunlight? Is your circadian rhythm on point? Are you eating enough red meat? Are you getting enough cholesterol and saturated fat, which is the building block of testosterone? Are you working out? Are you lifting heavy objects? Are you focusing on strength and hypertrophy training? Are you ramping up your cardiovascular activity throughout the week? That is much more difficult. And most physicians are not even taught to evaluate the deeper cause of whatever symptoms are happening. And so now you get guys who are part of this feminized culture, who of course are watching adult content, which is already a problem on its own, but they're low in energy, low in libido. Some men may suffer from erectile dysfunction. So you have negative repercussions. This affects men as a whole. And now they're not ambitious, they're not go-getters. And we have screwed up, how do I say this, the dynamic between men and women. And we could say this is an inadvertent consequence of certain institutions or like certain food companies that have orchestrated certain campaigns to push out food for profit. But we can also say there's a lot of orchestration, because when you affect the men, who are generally supposed to be masculine, and the men are responsible for rebellions or pushing the threshold of where the equilibrium is, if you weaken them, you lower the threshold of where rebellion could prosper. And so when you have a government, a centralized authority, and they see opportunity of where they can remove rights or remove power from the individual, which would be the rights, then they will try to find ways of hampering the pushback. And if you hamper the pushback of a masculine man, well, then you get a feminized man. And these feminized men are less likely to be ambitious enough to have pushback on centralized authorities. So I'm trying to say that in a very articulate way, but once you understand that function, we can now understand why there are certain ideologies from the top that trickle down into different institutions who want to adjust the dynamic of sexual dynamics. And this works out in their favor if you're one of these institutions that profit from the restructuring financially and idealistically. Now, at a certain point, there are people within these institutions who themselves are part of the problem. They're not maxing out. I like to mention the big five: status, charisma, resources, mentality, your looks. These are the big five that men should strive to max out on. Even the people who run these organizations, they don't max out on all five because they only know they're compartmentalized with some information. They may know how to make money financially. You may have men who understand they need to be charismatic, or some men that know that they need to look good. But very few men are consolidating on all five and understanding what's happening behind the curtains of, okay, yeah, there's a lot of orchestration, again, purposely or not purposely done, or potentially purposely done for a financial reason, but it just so happens to have a side effect of, okay, now we're lowering testosterone. Oh, that lowers the ability of pushback on our centralized authority. That's actually a positive thing. So we can now progress with this form of action. So you have people who are just part of the system, and they are none the wiser about other parts of the system. And so they focus on their part of the system, which maybe they'll say they're in food, and they are trying to sell cereal to people. And cereal is just processed grains with sugar. And so naturally, if you give something that has not been in our ancestry for, I mean, it's a very recent development, the past 100 years, giving cereal to men, you can produce cavities, you can produce lower testosterone, too many carbs, so now you're going to gain body fat, lethargy, brain fog, lowered cognitive function. So these are all things that can help a certain ideological agenda that you may be tied to. But directly, this is affecting you financially. You're benefiting financially from not stimulating, but actually doing the opposite. You're removing stimulation of testosterone, of the healthy development of fertile men. And so you get different repercussions. Like, this is a whole web of entanglement. It's not like one system goes in and we get the direct result. There are so many variables at play here. And you get a situation like Meghan Hall, where her husband is going along with her actions. She's mentally unstable, and then you have all these men who have limited options, and they're not prioritizing their duty over what's happening in front of them with this woman, and so they're jumping on that opportunity. And so we're at such a situation where we no longer have strong men. We no longer have submissive feminine women. We have the opposite, and we're seeing this play out now. It's not a bad thing for men to, let's say, stay home and take care of the kids. It's not a bad thing for women to go out and get jobs and work and all that. That's fine. But we have to understand that when we go to the radical extremes of it, when you have, which we're seeing now, we're seeing certain celebrities who come out and they're a man, but they're off the wall. They're turning into women. Or we're seeing women who are no longer feminine. Maybe they're still attractive, but they're so masculine, so bossy, so disagreeable that they're characterizing themselves as men. When you go to the radical extremes and then you multiply it in society, you end up with a civilization that is very different from places like China, where in China, if we look at their social media, they're teaching their population to revert back to the gender roles, which is masculine men, feminine women. That's how they're building their society. And with that, they can form a strong structure, a strong dynamic between men and women, and that allows them to focus on infrastructure and military and education. And they use that as leverage over places like the United States because they want to come and be the number one superpower. So now it presents an opportunity to places like China where they can come in and they can take over in some faction. And that now potentially 20, 30 years down the road lowers the standard of quality, the quality of living for us here in America. And potentially I don't want to say we would become a colony of China, but we would have to submit to a power or an authority that is much higher than us, because right now we're the number one superpower. But once we submit to another superpower that is higher than us, they have a better economy, better military, so on and so forth, then we have to prioritize their culture instead of ours. We have to prioritize their money instead of ours. And that can affect us, I've already said this before, but from an individualistic level. So our individual rights, our ability to freely speak, our ability to have the best products and services that we take for granted right now. All this goes out the window once we see a shift in dynamics, and then another country sees this as opportunity and they come in, and over the course of 1, 2, 3 generations, that's all it really takes, we slowly start to see the most powerful, prosperous nation in the world turn for the worse.